I like dragon eggs and I like plants, so I figured I'd combine the two, and it went great, until it didn't. Here's how that went. First I balled up some aluminum foil, wrapped that in masking tape, rolled out my polymer clay, and began wrapping it around the foil armature. Then I rolled it on a smooth surface to even it out a bit, and scraped away some of the excess clay with a loop tool. Then I tossed that in the oven, and once it was hard, I sanded it down. But then I realized I wanted it to be just a little thicker, so I threw another thin layer of clay on top of that. This time I pushed the sandpaper into the unbaked clay to give it a gritty, eggshell-like texture. And then it was time to paint, starting with a spray primer. I recently learned from a commenter that I should be thinning my paints, which was news to me because I'm relatively new to all this still, and I've pretty much learned everything either from experimenting or watching other YouTubers. And for some reason, none of them really seem to mention this step. So I looked up tutorials on that, and kept experimenting with adding a little more water until I got a consistency that I hoped was good enough. And so then I was able to begin adding the first layer of paint.
The idea behind this piece is that the egg was hidden in the grass by its mother to keep it from falling into the hands of the greedy royals who had been hunting them down.
Finally, I added some pinkish polka dots. Now the observant among you will notice that I did not have pink polka dots in the thumbnail photo, and you'll see why that is shortly. Next I needed to start setting up the terrarium, so I grabbed the glass container I'd be using, added the stone stacked as a false bottom, and messed up by putting the dirt in at the wrong point in the process. I thought about not showing this part because I messed it up on the last project also, but I figured we could all get a good laugh at my stupidity. Plus it'd be kinda hard to hide the fact that there was now dirt in all of these stones. So I meticulously took out the dirt, washed away my sins in the sink and the bathtub, and began doing what I should have done in the first place, cutting out the window screen to act as a barrier, crushing some charcoal to put down on top of that, and adding dirt, but this time at the right time. I used my polka dotted egg to make an indent where the final sculpture would end up going, so that I could start planting the pothos behind that. Then I added some moss that I'd collected outside, and I put the sculpture back in, and added some oak leaf creeping fig for an extra pop of green, a bit of a garnish if you will. Then I sprayed the inside of the terrarium, even though it was probably still wet from the whole dirt bathtub incident, and then I was at the point where I figured I was done. So I let it sit for a week to see how the plants would grow. But when I checked on it day after my factory job, I realized there was just something I didn't love about it. I think it just kind of looked less like a dragon egg and more like a dinosaur egg, which would probably still be really cool, but it wasn't what I wanted for this project. So I got on my iPad to do a mock-up in Procreate. Now I knew I liked the purple color, so I still wanted to keep that, but I felt like it just needed something else. So I asked my friend Castiel for his opinion, but he couldn't be bothered to help me. So I asked my assistant Audrey for her opinion, but she was busy doing, you know, whatever she does. So I thought, what color is dragony, royal, maybe represents wealth? Oh yeah, gold. So I tried out a few different designs before landing on this swirly one that I liked. So with that done, I had to go back to the sculpture and wipe off all those polka dots with a wet cloth. Unfortunately, this did wipe away a lot more than just the polka dots, so I went through the effort of redoing the original color of paint on top of what was still there. And just kinda hoped that it would be worth it. Now for those gold swirls, I had a couple of different options. I had my gold paint, which I had used before, but you know, that would make sense and be way too easy. And I've always really wanted to try gold leaf, so I bought some of that on Amazon. I didn't know how to use gold leaf, but I figured, what could go wrong? So I went to YouTube and watched a handful of videos to figure out how to use that. And I'd love to pretend that the first attempt went well, but everything seemed alright as I laid down the first swirl of adhesive. And I let that dry as instructed, and cut out some strips of the gold leaf itself, and had a great time applying it. So great, in fact, that I didn't even think to adjust the camera the whole time. And it's definitely not because I had glitter all over my hands. That would be silly. But then I realized the gold leaf wasn't coming off of parts that I didn't even apply adhesive to. So I asked a friend at work who does a lot of crafting projects that I figured had probably used gold leaf before. So what he thinks probably happened is that I used just a little too much of that adhesive, and it kind of spread out as I applied the gold leaf over top of things. But luckily, in my super diligent gold leaf research, I saw someone using masking tape to pull the gold leaf off of parts they didn't want it at. So I gave that a try. And it worked pretty well. And I ended up figuring out a more precise way that you'll see later on in the process. So with my newfound expertise, I was a lot more careful with the next swirls. I decided to make a nice circle of gold leaf that all the swirls could kind of originate from. And this attempt worked out way better than the last time. And from there, it was just apply and repeat. I think my first memory of dragons is probably the original Spyro game, which actually I think was one of the first games, if not the first game I ever played. I remember playing for hours on end with the stepbrothers that I had at the time, running around, shooting flames at the bad guys, solving some simple little platforming puzzles, and chasing that stupid freaking egg thief guy. And while I've since discovered way cooler dragons in things like The Hobbit / Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, Aragon, Harry Potter, that snarky little purple dragon will always hold a special place in my heart. So after I applied all the swirls, I went through and scraped away all the extra little gold leaf spots that I didn't want there. And that worked really well, but it also naturally brought some of the paint up with it. So I went in with a finer detail brush to paint up all those little spots. I'm sure a lot of that could have been avoided with more precision, but overall I'm pretty happy with how the gold leaf turned out. So I sealed it in with the protective varnish that came with it. So I've noticed there seems to be an adaptation period with a lot of plants when you put them into a new enclosure. Or maybe I'm just bad at plants. Or both. It's probably both. So I had to prune a little bit of the oak leaf creeping fig. And there's a little bit of yellowing on some of the pothos leaves. But I think everything will spring back with some care. And ultimately I'll probably have to move that pothos out of there once it gets too big anyway. Then I put the egg back in the terrarium. This time without the polka dots. And replace the creeping fig. And with that, it's time to show you how it turned out. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you don't mind, and good luck. Have fun.